Hello, it is Devin Price again, and I am here with another video version of one of my Substack essays. This is another one about child liberation and family abolition, and it's called It's Okay If Child Liberation and Family Abolition Make You Uncomfortable. I'm going to be reading the piece out loud to you here with the piece on the screen for you to follow along and providing some video descriptions and visual descriptions of images in the piece for all of our blind and uh, driving and other viewers who can't look at a screen at this time but want to hear the piece read out loud to them. So thank you everyone for all of the encouragement so much about of making these formats so far. I've really been enjoying doing them. It's a very accessible way to put more video content out there for me, and my plan is to adapt a lot of my major essays, my most popular essays, into this format. So please give me any feedback you have on that and how this is working for you, or any pieces that you'd like to see adapted. And I'll try to put those at the top of the list. All right, I'm going to just switch to my screen share right here and pull up the piece. It's on drdevinprice.substack.com. And again, it's called It's Okay If Child Liberation and Family Abolition Make You Uncomfortable. Ask questions, acknowledge your feelings. These are the growing pains of considering a radically new idea. Our first image at the top of this piece is a stock photo from Unsplash of a aerial shot of a family on a picnic blanket, a mom, a dad, and a kid, and I've used a glitch image generator to make it look a little bit distorted. I remember that I first encountered the concept of family abolition on Tumblr when I was about 24 or 25 years old, and that it made me massively uncomfortable. To remove the system of protection and nurturance that guide a young child's life seemed to me to create a horrifying vacuum of meaning into which absolutely anything could climb and take advantage. Without the structure of the family, who would prevent a child from being abused by any and every random adult that ever had access to them? I wondered. And how could a child ever be expected to get ahead in life if they didn't have multiple loving relatives devoted to their well-being, who spoke to them, read to them, taught them how to cook and to clean, how to balance a checkbook, drive a car, and distinguish good from bad? I myself had been a survivor of multiple assaults, including some intense violations when I was a child, so I found the whole concept triggering. I knew that not every person could be trusted around children, and that young people were naive and largely powerless, and so they needed someone to defend them. That some people wanted to see a child's only source of safe belonging taken away from them outraged and terrified me. The irony was that my own early experiences of sexual violation had come from one of my parents. And for all that I had stressed about the need for family members to pass on important life lessons to their children, I had needed to train myself in so many skills. My eating disordered, ARFID afflicted relatives had no capacity to teach me how to meal plan or to cook, let alone know how much that I should eat. My father was verbally abusive during the 2 driving lessons that he tried to give me, and I only just figured out the basics of how to clean after watching this wonderful how-to video from an autistic house cleaner and YouTuber earlier this year. This is a video from a channel called Midwest Magic Cleaning, and the title of the video is "This Should Be Required Viewing Before Graduating High School. Cleaning is Not Intuitive." And I encourage you to watch this video. It has a lot of important lessons on how to go about keeping your house clean that make it a lot less intimidating. Certainly helped me a lot. I learned from this video that dishwashing soap is one of the most powerful and yet gentle cleaners you can possibly have. And so you can replace basically half of the cleaning supply aisle at the grocery store with just dish soap and a little bit of water and be basically fine, and use that to clean your house. And I've been following that tip ever since. Another irony about my fears of family abolition that only became clear to me in retrospect was that at the time, I had already known that most people's fears of crime and predation do not track with statistical reality. Though decades of sensationalistic true crime media have made the public fearful that a violent stranger is forever lurking in the bushes ready to ambush them, and they feel increasingly unsafe, in reality, the violent crime rate has been on a decline in the United States since at least the early 1990s, and the majority of people who do victimize others are known to the victim and relied upon by them. It is our parents, brothers, boyfriends, bosses, priests, wives, mothers, and the cops who are by far the most likely to harm us, not some passing stranger on the street. And this is a link to a piece by me about that idea called "Your Fear is Dangerous and Your Power is Greater Than You Think." It drove me mad that members of the public did not realize that it was the people who held power over them who had the greatest capacity to harm them, and instead voted to increase policing budgets, covered their properties in surveillance cameras, and called the authorities on random black kids in their neighborhoods, all in the pursuit of feelings of safety that were completely detached from reality. I was a hardcore prison abolitionist already, working to get the solitary confinement prison in Tams, Illinois shut down, and reading heart-rending letters from inmates every day. So it sickened me that people's greatest insecurities were being used against them to create more and more powerful systems of state violence and coercive control. And yet, there I was, just as confused in my reactions, thinking that it was the family that protected children from predation, when my own experience had shown how often the opposite was the case. When my dad was behaving in sexually inappropriate ways with me as a teen, I had trustworthy relatives that I could have turned to, and adults that I knew at work and school who would have been happy to explain the practicalities of adult life to me and help me build my independence. But doing something so extreme as breaking away from my family was never a thought in my mind. I wasn't going to set out on some intimidating, dramatic legal emancipation process. I needed my family to help me get through high school, to give me a place to live, some food to eat, access to a car for my part-time job, a signatory so that I could have a bank account. The kids I knew who were emancipated couldn't go to college because they didn't have parents to fill out a FAFSA. And that's the free application for federal student aid. For those of you outside the US. They didn't get good educations or get to participate in any extracurriculars. All of their lives turned out incredibly bleak. Usually they got pregnant before turning 18 at the hands of some 30-year-old drunk fanatical Christian with a manufacturing job who kept a roof over their heads until the Ford plant shut down, and then moved them halfway across the country, where they were even more isolated. To try and assert myself against my family in any way meant destroying the entire foundation for my identity and future, and dive into an unforgiving abyss. I wasn't foolhardy enough to do that. I wasn't abused enough, or by everyone, so I couldn't justify such a dramatic rupture of my entire life. Where I lived, who I knew, what my name was, how I prayed, the work that I did then as a landscaper, the accent I had, what money I had, the words I used, the beliefs I carried, my goals, all of it came from my family. I couldn't just leave all of that. And yet, by the time I did turn 18, I had resolved to stop speaking to my father forever, and cemented that decision by changing my last name on my birthday. I moved away from my hometown as quickly as I possibly could. I had needed to slip loose of the confines of the family. But because there was nothing in the world to replace it, no system of meaning or structure of support that could help me figure out who I was or how I might get by in life, doing so felt almost violently self-destructive. The family that protects is also the one that imprisons. But that is too world-shaking and upsetting a realization for most people to make easily. It certainly was for me. And so I had to think on the family's defects, despite having lived it for many years. I debated with anarchists and family abolitionists online, not really making salient points, just expressing that the idea of granting children full legal personhood was freaky and perverted sounding to me. I asked a lot of questions about who would look after children in the family's absence, and how society would ensure that everybody was adequately taught and looked after. And to my surprise, rather than getting frustrated, the anarchists that I spoke to said that these were very good questions, ones that we all needed to think about and build solutions for, because society was already failing at such important things. I wrote a lot of anguished, hand-wringing posts in which I said that something had to be there to look after children, as if I were praying to some god of reasonable authority to come down and set everything right. But there was no such god. There never had been. If there had been, my dad wouldn't have looked my nude teenaged body all up and down hungrily and declared himself proud that he hadn't done anything further. I also started learning a whole lot more about abuse. I read Lindsay Gibson's book, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, and recognized that no living person in my family knew how to handle big emotions and had reacted with tension and distance anytime that I seemed too joyful, angry, or sad, until I became incapable of expressing such things. I read Albert Bernstein's How to Deal with Emotionally Explosive People and saw my father's emotional volatility thrown into sharp relief, and discovered just how much work I'd done as a kid to parent and therapize him. I read Kenneth Adams' book, Silently Seduced, about child survivors of covert incest, and it slowly dawned on me just how much my mind had been warped by serving as a parent's sole confidant, quasi-spouse, and best friend. After that, I found Lee Edelman's more radical text, No Future, Queer Theory and the Death Drive, which is all about the ways in which our society treats children not as complete people, but as future reproducers of the society itself. According to Edelman, it is through the rearing and indoctrination of children that a culture continues to pass along its existing values and structure, as if it were stamping messages of propaganda onto blank screens. This image here is just the covers of the 4 books that I just mentioned: Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents by Lindsay Gibson, How to Deal with Emotionally Explosive People by Albert Bernstein, Silently Seduced, When Parents Make Their Children Partners by Kenneth Adams, and No Future, Queer Theory and the Death Drive by Lee Edelman. What the child wants or feels simply does not matter to society. They are but a breeding chamber for reproducing existing ideas, providing future labor, and eventually birthing the next generation of kids, who will also be indoctrinated to believe what their parents before them believed, to live as their parents lived. And so, we are all societally trained to be very conservative about children, exposing them to new and unfamiliar ideas or exploring new ways for them to live feels like a terrifying act of destruction toward society itself. Because, in a way, it is. Anyone who does not treat children as if they are seed pods for familiar ideas and well-worn cultural practices risks being seen as a perversion of the existing social order and a threat to all that we know and hold to be unquestionably true. What most people are missing, however, is that this can be a good thing. The open existence of queer people makes it harder for society to teach children that heterosexuality is natural and right. Telling children that often the police kill innocent people and that racism is widespread makes it less likely they will grow into adults who support our existing police state. Admitting to young people that the adults do not actually know everything and that the laws of our land were not designed to be fair, but were mostly cobbled together by a series of profit motives and prejudices means that we can no longer decide for the kid what is right, and that they might adopt completely different morals from the ones we do, and be better for it. The very structure of our society becomes very shaky beneath our feet, and we're terrified that we might all just tumble into a complete nothing world without any rules or commonly held values. And so we get uncomfortable when a person is too honest about the harsh realities of the world to a child, and nervously ask, how am I supposed to explain to a kid that queer people / genocide / white supremacy / injustice exist? Even if our actual politics are fairly radical, and we do believe that our world needs to change, we have this intuitive gut feeling that we have to raise our children to feel that reality is just, that the structures around them are to be trusted, the rules to be followed, the people put in charge of them are safe. Because what will we do if none of that's true? I am here to tell you that's a very good question, and that all your reservations about the concepts of child liberation and family abolition are worth talking about. Don't dismiss how freaked out or confused you might feel. If you think some of what I'm saying is absurd or utopian, go ahead and say that to me or to somebody else. Just stay in the conversation. Follow your questions through to wherever they lead. Keep reading about these ideas and finding your own problems with them. I don't expect you to land exactly where I have wound up over time, and certainly my own mind is still wandering. I would just like you to grow. The whole basis behind these ideas is that there is no trustworthy authority who should rule us. We get to decide how we wish to live, what we believe in, and how we will solve problems. And we will make it our mission to allow as many people as possible to be equally free. But I understand that it's anxiety-provoking stuff. It's existentially and emotionally threatening. And so, if you still have major reservations with child liberation and family abolition, reservations that I very much myself did have, I want to give you the following reassurances. No one is trying to take your mommy and daddy away. Family abolition is about the eradication of the family as a system of owning people and transferring property. The legal, financial family reinforces wealth inequality that exists on the basis of race. It forces women into caretaking roles and limits their economic and social freedom. It isolates people from wider communities, indoctrinates children into conservative beliefs, and is a tool by which society maintains itself as it presently is. If we were to abolish the legal construction of the family, you could still freely choose to love your Mima and Grandpa and spend all of your holidays with them. I promise. In fact, under such a reality, every person would be free to choose whom they love and trust. People would still have biological parents, and often relatives that they knew, but family would not be determined by blood or by someone's name. If the people who raised you are lovely people with whom you share a close relationship, that is so great and you can keep them. You might also fold a close buddy or neighbor into your existing family structure if you like, too. Family abolition isn't coming anytime soon. I find that when I discuss any form of abolition, people get very anxious about what will replace the prison / family / educational system that we presently have, and they shut down from the conversation quickly with visions of wild running pedophiles and escaped convicts playing about in their heads. In these cases, I often want to comfort my conversation partner by reminding them that the ideas I'm talking about are still really niche and unpopular. Nobody is coming to take your family away. Thus, there is absolutely zero harm in having a casual philosophical chat about it. What we are discussing is an alternative vision of what the future could be. But if this world is going to dramatically improve, then people have to believe that the cost of keeping things the same is a whole lot larger than the cost of change. Right now, most people seem to think that there is no alternative to the way that our world is structured at all, which makes it very difficult for us to address the actual problem of children being abused by their caretakers, who are the number one abusers of children, are their caretakers. I'd just like for it to be possible for us to speak openly about this and to imagine that a better world is possible. You are safe Even if these ideas feel really scary, there is nothing dangerous about talking about them. Family abolition does not mean a lack of protections and resources for children, but rather an abundance of them. One of the things that currently keeps so many children trapped within abusive families is the total absence of any other options. A restrictive society maintains itself by convincing its subjects that they need it, that they need the society to restrict them, and that it is the very grounding in which their life exists. But this is not true. If there were no laws forcing parents to feed and raise their children, most people would have a strong motivation to care for those around them and to open up their lives to those in need. In fact, it is our property laws and our financial laws, including the ones that say parents own their children, that make it so difficult for people to depend upon larger, more interdependent communities. Just look to the people of Gaza, who have lost just about everything that most of us in the rest of the world rely upon for meaning and structure. They don't have a functioning state or any kind of political representation. They don't have any laws or anyone to enforce them. Their homes, universities, libraries, museums, shops, mosques, and churches have been destroyed. They've been stuck behind a total Israeli blockade for going on 7 weeks now and running out of the last dregs of food. And still they choose to gather together in bombed-out buildings to feed one another, pray, take care of stray cats, and even put on clown costumes and entertain hundreds of other people's orphaned children. This is a picture from Instagram from the account Mohammed.Ibrahim7 of a gathering of children in the Gaza Strip and a few adult men dressing in clown costumes to entertain them and just kind of cheer the kids on. And the children are laughing and smiling in the picture, and so are the adults that are entertaining them. And it's just a nice brief respite of relief and joy during a genocide and mass starvation event. If you have the means, I strongly encourage you to go over to Mohammed Ibrahim's Instagram account that I've linked to in the piece and throw him and his community a little bit of money, or go to GazaFunds.com, which will take you to a random Palestinian fundraiser that has been vetted. I know we can't all support everyone, and it can be hard to make these decisions, so you can use that site to have a random number generator make the decision for you of who to give your money to. This is how the average person behaves when there is no legal or social structure in place that prevents them from being pro-social. Even when their life has gone the absolute worst that a person's life can go, and they have every reason to be filled with hateful or antisocial sentiments, the average person feels drawn toward the community, to be of aid to others, and they care about the little lives around them who cannot look after themselves. See also Rebecca Solnit's Faith in Humanity Restoring book, A Paradise Built in Hell. If you're new to anarchism, that book is a really gentle place to start. If children were not the property of their parents, and if helping another person's kid was not seen as an illegal and predatory act the way it is today, children would have numerous safe adults to whom they could turn. There will always be people who feel called by something fundamental inside them to love, feed, comfort, educate, and inspire children. Playing around with children is an intrinsically motivating act. It's fun and helps you melt years of cynicism off your body. Caring for other people in need is itself a core human calling. Why do you think so many child-free people still consider themselves plant dads or boy moms to their cats? It is because even with how much parenthood has become associated with financial and logistical burden in our world, most of us have a nurturing instinct that it feels really meaningful to satisfy. There will be a family for all kids if we abolish the legal family. I promise. This is a screenshot of a Tumblr post by me, drdemonprince.tumblr.com. Go there for the really unvarnished takes or for my ask box. And I've written, "You don't hate kids. You hate being forced into a caretaking role. You don't hate kids. You hate censorship passed off as family values. You don't hate kids. You hate the constrictiveness of the nuclear family. You don't hate kids. You're just not used to occupying fully age-diverse spaces, so you're not used to the noise or the many different kinds of needs. You don't hate kids. Most public spaces just aren't built for kids, and so the few kids you see are always uncomfortable and distressed. You don't hate kids. You hate the intense social rules assigned to kids and anyone who interacts with kids. You don't hate kids. You hate how society reproduces its most restrictive elements and how kids are powerless to resist it. Family abolition is part of a larger social project that includes the abolition of prison, forced institutional education, oppressive states, and capitalism. Family abolition isn't just going to happen overnight. All the more reason not to be scared of talking about it. For it to be made possible, a lot about how the world is organized would have to change. This photo is an overhead aerial shot of a suburb with a cul-de-sac, and it has again been glitched and disrupted to look distorted with shades of pink and kind of a sepia tone overlaid over it. Take, for example, the structure of the suburbs, dotted with unwalkable shopping centers and distantly spread apart single-family homes. These communities were built for the white, middle-class, nuclear family of the 1950s. And if your family doesn't look like one of those, then the setup creates a lot of problems for you. Your ailing grandmother can't walk to church for bingo every Tuesday night, so she's trapped at home. It's 3 miles from your door to your kid's school, and 1.5 miles to their nearest friend, and so it's almost impossible for them to get educated or socialize without you driving them around, which in turn makes life a lot harder for you. But if we lived in more closely knit and interdependent communities, how we live and build family could radically change. Imagine if more humans lived the way a great many indigenous societies have, and continue to, with a clutch of small homes gathered around a public community space, with separate public buildings for meal preparation, eating, education, and political gatherings that could all be reached on foot. It would be a whole lot easier for a kid to leave their parents' house and go stay with a supportive auntie or a friend's parent if things got hairy in such a setup. And because so many community members would be around and making incidental contact with one another on foot, people would notice when abuse was happening and step in far more quickly. The legal nuclear family is just one of the ways in which people are kept shackled and are heavily indoctrinated by our current society. It's not enough to simply throw open the bars of this particular cage. We would need a world where every person could access the resources they needed, find support, and connect with other people readily. We talk about family abolition because we want to live to see that world and to build it. Here is a link to one of my more recent posts on Substack, Abolish Age. Every person deserves both freedom and support, no matter how long they've been alive. There is a video version of this piece on YouTube as well. Family abolition is rooted in the belief that human beings can create the solutions to our own problems in an active, ongoing way. Often people criticize child liberation and family abolition by calling them idealistic. I wonder why exactly that is a bad thing. Why is it a waste of time to talk about how the world might function better? There is no reason to discourage creative and imaginative problem solving unless you think it is impossible for the world to change. Or if you believe, and have been conditioned to believe, that you can play no role in shaping your society. Ours is a profoundly authoritarian world. We rely upon authority figures such as lawmakers and church leaders to tell us what is correct to do. And if we do not follow their instructions, we can be attacked by the police and then locked up. We do not get to weigh in on the rules of our land very much at all. At most, we get to choose between two political representatives that aren't all that different from one another and will not listen to us. Our educators have control over us and decide what is important for us to learn when we are young. The people who raised us also owned us. In such a world, it is easy to see oneself as powerless and to believe that all meaningful change must come from above with perfectly designed intent. Anarchic ideas like child liberation and family abolition challenge all of this. At their core, they presume that individual people are competent and creative. We are the ones who make up society, after all, with our daily work, our habits, and the relationships we build. Society would be nothing without our collective buy-in. We make it every single day, and so we can unmake it. By collectively refusing to follow unjust laws, supporting one another until we are not dependent upon the state anymore, and making decisions every single day about how we want the world to be, we have the power to change things. This is why anarchists generally do not discourage open conversations about what would replace the police if prisons were shut down, schools if education were made less institutional, and the family if it were abolished. We want everyone to be thinking about such things and to never stop asking questions and finding ways society could be improved. We anarchists might give a lot of answers that non-anarchists find frustrating at first, such as saying there won't be as much need to protect people against crime in our future world because people will have greater access to food and shelter, and the vulnerable won't be controlled by powerful others in the ways that allow abuse to exist. But it's also a feature of anarchism that we don't have definitional answers at all. Anarchy challenges you, the reader, to be an active participant in the society in which you live. You are trusted to have valuable insight into where problems like child abuse and predation come from, to be able to do something in real time to prevent them and to address them when they occur. It is idealistic, yes, but it's also aspirational. Anarchism is arguably a kind of anti-politics. Rather than giving over power and responsibility to run society into the hands of a few elected elites, it gives it all right back to you. It is a process of constant reflection, decision-making, and reevaluating. And it's meant to be so fluid that if any one solution does not work, then the people are always empowered to try something new. This complete freedom to direct one's own destiny is scary if you are not used to it, just as talk of abolishing the family is. It's uncomfortable to hold true responsibility for your actions. But it also means that your fate is yours again, and that you can always make the right choice. You can be the person to take in an orphan child off the street. You can be the one who speaks up when you see a caretaker striking a young person. You can decide to speak to young queer kids about their history or how to practice safer sex. And if you see someone repeatedly abusing their power over children, you and your community can step in and make it stop. I understand if that sounds like too much to carry right now. That's okay. Sometimes it also overwhelms me. But stay here in this conversation with me. Keep criticizing the ideas. Keep speaking to your discomfort and hesitations. Don't ever stop exploring. Don't ever believe that this world cannot change. If you'd like to read more about anarchism and family abolition, I recommend the following sources, also listed in the Substack. Toward the Abolition of the Family, Why We Demand It and Why It Matters by Lee Cicuta on Medium, also known as Butch Anarchist on all social media. The Debate Anarchism subreddit, so r/debate anarchism. Great place to ask questions and fight and have that be welcomed. I've linked also to the Anarchist Library's writings on child liberation. There's a huge volume of stuff there. I've included on Substack a link to the PDF of Lee Edelman's book, No Future, so you can download that book right there. And also, I included links to access all the other books I mentioned on libgen.is, which is a place where you can get books for free. And if you're interested in learning more about supported decision-making, a model that allows for disabled individuals, and potentially maybe children, to advocate for themselves while still receiving guidance and being informed of their options by a supporter of their choosing, here are some journal articles you might enjoy, and I've attached those PDFs to the Substack. Supportive decision-making, a viable alternative to guardianship. Supporting choices, supported decision-making in practice. Beyond supported decision-making, the need for supported engagement for neurodivergent adults. Check all of those resources out if you are interested in this stuff. It's a rich vein to be diving into. Again, it's still very much a niche community that a lot of passionate, very left-wing, anti-establishment types are having. We could always use more people having these conversations and sharing what resources they have. Unschoolers, disability advocate types, anybody who's interested in liberatory approaches, prison abolitionists, police abolitionists, anybody in that vein, you are so welcome in these conversations. And as well as people who think that these ideas sound crazy and whack and unrealistic, because that is how I initially felt as well. Let's dive into the comments. See if there's anything worth responding to while I'm here. Cleo Bricks said, I always wonder how much of people's reluctance to ponder what a better world might look like is rooted in the fact that having an idea of what could be makes it much harder to casually shrug off what is. Denial is a potent force, but it's only an anxiolytic, not a cure proper. One that only works, for a very, very generous definition of works, if the notion that there's no alternative is not questioned. Well said, Cleo. Cleo has a great Substack as well, if I recall correctly. I believe I follow them. And I think that's completely spot on, that people reject ideas of abolition in general because if they were to admit how wrong the present society is, it would make them just itch with existential discomfort. And so it's easier to believe that this is all that there is, that these structures of power are inarguable and inescapable. Sometimes dreaming of a better world just makes you ache for it so much that it's really hard to contend with. Shout out to the Leftist Cooks here on YouTube. They just had a video about being told to grow up and what that means, and the hatred of children that is really endemic in our society. I just found their channel, and it's really great. So we seem to be operating on similar wavelengths right now, and it's great to see. Zoe said, I'm just back from a family vacation. The family in question is myself and my partner, their kid and their co-parent, their co-parents, two partners, their kids' best friends, and her two parents. My partner's kid decided a few years ago, age 12, that he wanted to move in with his bestie. His parents and her parents agreed to support him to do that. We are all walking distance apart. We form a support network for each other and care for our disabled family members as well as the kids, who we refer to kids collectively as the people's children. It is absolutely possible to imagine a different way of being in family and community. I've gone on a very similar journey from child-free kid hater to hardline child liberationist, and it's been so enriching to realize how much I have to learn from people society deems minor who have such interesting and thoughtful perspectives on the world. Thank you for your comment, Zoe. I got a question from Anne Marie on Substack, joining the conversation here. Among other things like that, this is the first time I'm hearing about family abolition. I appreciated the part you shared about toward the end about indigenous structures where everyone was closer knit, with multi-generational families, which I see in travels overseas as well. And it feels to me like we're talking about the abolition or replacement of the nuclear family. You used that term toward the end too, and I've learned a lot about how the nuclear family is the enemy of true care and community. I totally see that. And now I see how it's also in place to hoard and transfer wealth, predominantly white wealth. I appreciate this huge piece you've added. Do you think abolishing the nuclear family is what you're going for? And if it's more than that, like the family in general, how is that as good an idea as just having larger multi-gen family units than the network with other large family, multi-gen family units, etc.? Also, can you share the law that says parents own their children? Thank you. And I already answered this one in the text, but I'll read it out loud. So Anne, I think you're pretty much, or Anne-Marie, sorry. You are, I think, really spot on here that most family abolition writers are anarchists coming from a predominantly white European anarchist tradition. So the family that they are critiquing is the European nuclear family of model, the model that has been used to hoard wealth and preserve wealth and name for white people. And that neglects the fact that family has meant a lot of different things to a lot of different communities. Someone else in the comments suggested family liberation as a better term. And I think if we were to liberate our ideas of what the family is, that would include multi-generational families, as well as community structures, queer families, neighborhood families, clans, tribes, groupings of people based on a variety of different things that they have in common and to share with each other. It wouldn't be exclusively people related by blood or anything like that, but then again, very few families, when you really zoom out of the nuclear structure that's been imposed, very few families actually look like that anyway. Most of them are a lot more dynamic. So I think it would absolutely include a lot of those types of multi-generational family structures. And it's really only been colonization, the creation of states and citizenship laws and ID laws that have forced a lot of people into that family structure, when previously the way that they might have lived would have been a lot more dynamic. As for which specific law makes children the property of their parents, it's basically a core assumption underlying how a lot of our laws work. So even things like IDs and names, right? You're just given the name of the person who gave birth to you, and that marks you as of them. Their property passes on to you when they die. They have the rights to decide when you're a child where you live, what you eat, what faith you worship, what happens to your body medically, what happens to your body in general. And that is just all given to them as a given, and they have to be really, really egregiously violating those parental rights and held basically criminally accountable for it before that ownership of you passes on to someone else. But if you're a child, it always passes on to someone else. You have always a legal owner and guardian as a child. Even things like in loco parentis laws that say that while the school is holding the child, they are the guardian temporarily, again, is treating a child as property. And so there isn't a single law that puts this into place. It's a whole structure of how we handle wealth, child rearing, privacy, parents' rights, and so on. And that's where it comes from, largely. Let me make sure that I credit the person who encouraged the idea of using family liberation. Where is that person? Oh, Chris, thank you. I prefer the term family liberation. I think it has a more positive context. I think that what also gets left out of the discussion is the idea of the village raising the child and parental supports. As a parent doing the hard work of unlearning my childhood trauma and verbal abuse, I need a lot more support to support my children. Yes. One of the reasons that parents fail their kids today, it's not because they're evil. Yes, it is because they have a lot of power, but it's also because they're in really desperate circumstances. If someone does not have enough childcare support, if they don't have support for their kids' disabilities, if they don't have enough money, they're working a full-time job, all this stuff, they are going to be more likely to neglect or abuse their kid. They're going to make mistakes and failures that are a lot larger than just the ordinary mistakes of everyday life that like every parent makes. The whole idea that a child just belongs to the people that like gestated them and like made like reproduced them in the most biological level is just not in line with how most of human society works. Lots of people look after kids, they pool childcare and resources, and so on and so forth. The last comment that I wanted to share is on Medium. I do also post my stuff to Medium. If you have a Medium membership, that's just a legacy thing there. And I have a great comment from my buddy James Finn. If you've read Unmasking Autism or Unlearning Shame, you've heard of James Finn before. He is a ACT UP activist, just a wonderful queer writer and autistic man, and just a great mentor to me in a great many ways. And if you're on Medium, you should definitely follow him because his writing is excellent and very, very excellent responsive reporting on attacks on queer rights all throughout the U.S. Constantly happening on his page. So he's highlighted the portion where I talk about how people find it very uncomfortable to acknowledge difficult realities in the world to children, to talk to children about racism or sex or rape or police violence or anything else. And James says, the funny thing is that when my partner and I took in an abused teenager, he had a lot to teach us that made us uncomfortable in the same way you're describing. He was facing warehousing in an institution that was a prison in all but name, because he'd been severely neglected and abused in his natal family, and badly mistreated later in his adoptive family and at school. He didn't have a violent bone or nerve cell in his body, but the system treated him as a threat to society because he had trouble adapting to his, Dickensian upbringing. Even the mental health system was against him, wrote him off as best suited or perhaps only suited to that warehouse until he became an adult and could probably be placed in a proper prison. That's actually what one therapist told him. You're headed for prison. Despite the fact that he'd never harmed anyone, he just wouldn't conform or obey rules that he considered senseless or harmful. Talking about the realities of the world, talking about pervasive injustice, which he often initiated because he lived it, did not harm him. And what I mean by lived it is that he only weighed about 70 pounds when he was 14 years old, and the backs of his thighs and lower back were traced with scar tissue. Today, he's thriving. I'm sure he has his nightmares, but his therapist turned out to be wrong about his having no future. If he could live through and talk about how toxic social structures encourage abuse, if he could actually educate my partner and me about it from a personal perspective, it seems misguided, at least, to suppose that it's not possible to discuss these issues with children at all. I mean, what's the real risk? That we raise children who become disposed to rejecting cruelty and inhumanity, even when they are rooted in traditional institutions? That doesn't sound like a risk to me. It sounds like a reward. And I just wanted to thank James for writing that excellent comment and for all of the great writing that he does about these subjects. And he's also written essays about his experience raising a child with a partner as a gay man in the 90s, 2000s, in a time where that was very difficult to do legally. So that is the piece. Thank you so much, everyone who's been watching. Let me know, again, what else you'd like to see me narrate. And I really appreciate getting to reach a different audience of people. I know a lot of you ADHDers like a read out version of a piece. Again, hearing from blind listeners and viewers has been amazing. And I look forward to doing more of this. It's been great practice for me. It's a different way to kind of engage with the piece, and I hope people like it. And maybe someday I'll get a computer that can handle editing video, and I'll find the patience in my brain to do something a little bit more slick and YouTuber video essay-ish. But for me, I always know that I need to just start making the thing that I want to see, rather than hold myself to a really, really, really high standard. So hopefully this is helping in terms of accessibility of stuff. Thanks for being here, and I'll see ya around. Bye.